If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. My family loves to go on vacation in Sweden, and my grandmother even has a cottage in the forest that all the family members use if they want. A couple of years ago when I was 20, I was on vacation there with my mum and grandma sometime in autumn for about 10 days. This is a Swedish backwoods. We go there to unwind, to enjoy nature and take a rest from civilization. Hiking, canoeing, and looking for stuff, sitting around the campfire, and just them sorts of things. It's not completely isolated. You can find some villages and fields here and there. It's definitely very rural though, so you don't have much of a chance of encountering other people. Now, I've always liked to go exploring on my own, finding out the new paths through the woods, fixing our old maps to reflect the landscape better. The maps you can buy of this area haven't been updated for years, and many paths don't even exist anymore due to overgrowth. What I also like to do is explore old abandoned buildings, and rural Sweden's great for this. Back in the 1800s, Swedish people in the countryside were dirt poor and starving, so many moved to the New World for a better life. You can still find the foundations of farmhouses, even foundations of entire villages in the woods, sometimes with rusted 100-plus-year-old farm equipment. Also, like so many countries, Sweden has an issue with rural exodus nowadays, with middle-aged and young people moving away to cities. Old people stay out there until they die, and no one buys their houses until they're literally just sitting there abandoned. This means a lot, so you can find many empty houses in the forest, and I just love exploring them. Most of them have already been looted, presumably by hunters, loggers or hikers, but sometimes you can find interesting things. Now, one crisp autumn day, I took one of our bicycles, a map, and something to eat and drink, told my mum and grandma I wanted to be back by nightfall, and at the latest, would be set out to explore there. On the map I had chosen, there's a wide loop that I guess would take about 3 hours if the paths were clear and didn't stop to explore. But even if I did, I guess I had plenty of time until dusk. I had a lot of fun at first, driving the mountain bike down smaller and smaller forest paths, finding foundations of old buildings and some root cellars that were still intact and some mushrooms. I have some problems with the map though. Like I said, many paths that are still on the map don't exist anymore, so I had to turn back a few times, but mostly I had a pretty good idea of where I was. Of course, that made it all take longer than I anticipated, and when I reached the furthest point of the loop and turned into a path that, according to the map, would take me back and add an hour, the sun's already setting now. At this point, I'm already feeling a bit uneasy, I have to admit, because of my bad time management and because I was worried that I could trust the map even less than I thought. And shortly before turning onto the path, I found some traps in the woods that kinda creeped me out. 3 big cages, each with a platform in the middle that was connected to a steel door in front. On those platforms were some kind of animal remains, rotted black things with bones sticking out, etc. But it hadn't been touched, I guess, since the doors were still open. I had taken a stick and deactivated the traps by pushing onto the platforms through the cage bars. When the doors had snapped shut, it was so loud that I flinched. Now, as clumsily as I was cycling along on the uneven ground, I realised the sun's setting. I had this uncomfortable feeling that everything around me was sort of aware, if that makes sense. It wasn't the feeling of being watched, not quite yet. It just felt like I had to try and be quiet now, somehow. After a while, I came upon a crossroad in a more open area where I was supposed to follow the path straight. The trees were not so high here, and I guessed it had just been one of the clearings created by a severe storm years ago. At that crossroad was a tiny wooden building, somewhere between a shed and a cabin. I had originally set out to find abandoned houses so far, and I've only seen a couple of foundations. So even though at this point I should have turned back, curiosity gets the better of me. I want to check if this was locked and if I could take a peek inside. It's not locked, but the door was kind of stuck in the frame for a moment until I could tear it loose. Inside the cabin was a cot, a tiny oven, a mass of taxidermy animals that I've never seen before. They've even taxidermy animals on the cot and on the oven, now to the walls and ceiling, and the entire inside of the cabin, every inch of it's covered in a layer of black mold. It was so much that some of the animals were there and you couldn't really tell what they were anymore, only guess from the shape. They all looked monstrous covered in that stuff, and the smell was overwhelming. I quickly tried to close the door again, but the wood had warped so much it's not possible, so I left it hanging to get out of there. As I was cycling away from the cabin, I felt so strange. This time, I did feel like I was being watched, and was nonsensely thinking, you should have closed that door. I don't know why I thought that, but it made me uneasy to think the shed door's open. I told myself I'm being silly, because why would it matter? Obviously no one's using it anymore. And about 10 minutes later, the path entered a stretch of older woods with much higher trees. The sun was now close to the horizon, the skies full of orange light. Under the fir trees, it was already getting very dark. I checked my phone to tell my mum that I may be going to be late, but there's no reception. A couple more minutes into the dark forest and the path disappeared. At this point, I have two options. Try and push through with my bike until I met a logging road that was hopefully on the other side of that stretch of woods and it can take me back, or return, go past the mold shed again and try go back the other way. Basically, the second option was not an option for me. As I already said, I kind of had to zigzag and improvise even to come this far, because the map's wrong in every place seemingly. Going all the way back is a perfect way to get lost out there in the dark. But also, I really don't want to go past the shed again. And now I have a sudden aversion to look behind me. As dusk was creeping through the forest, I was getting really paranoid at this point. The uneasy feeling crystallized into the idea that I've disturbed something there. Because I've left the door open, it's following me. I know it's stupid, but I can't shake the feeling. Going back past the shed, past those traps, and then through the ruins of that old village, past the open mouths of the root cellars in the dark, getting lost in there with the feeling of something possibly on my trail. No way I'm going back. You might even get lost trying to go through the woods in front of me. And I would have to push, maybe even carry my bike. For the woods don't seem to stretch too far in front of me, only left and right, so it seemed like the better option. I was just hoping at this point the supposed logging road on the other side's still there. After tearing through some barbels for a bit, I found what I guess might be the remnants of the old path, because the ground was sort of lower there, and I tried to follow that until I come upon another set of ruins. The foundations of some farmhouse presumably. Behind that, the ground slopes down into a marshy area with birches that seem very white in the gloom under the trees. At this point, I stopped to listen. I still don't want to turn around. I couldn't hear anything, but the feeling of being watched, being alone, only increases at this point, and I felt like something was coming for me. But like the forest itself was somehow aware of my presence, listening, watching, like it was being deliberately quiet. I was feeling so scared that I didn't even try and talk myself out of the feeling anymore. I just accept it as what I'm dealing with now. I had some leftover food in my backpack, half a sandwich and some sesame snacks. And then, the mushrooms I found earlier. I took it all out, laying it on a stone, on one of the walls that surrounds the ruins. I then said something along the lines of, "Please let me go, I'm really sorry. I won't come back here again. I just want to go home, please. I'm sorry." Or something along the lines of that. And after that, I grabbed my bike and went down into the swamp, still looking back only partially. Luckily, it turned out it wasn't a large swamp or anything, really just a wet patch for about 200 meters until the ground sloped downwards again, then upwards. Still, it took a while because of the bike to get out of and really hurt my calves. And I can't really see anymore and was constantly stepping into puddles getting stuck. When I emerged on the other side, I was absolutely soaked in sweat, and my heart is absolutely pounding. And then, wouldn't you know it, the trees opened up, and there it is, the logging road. I could have cried with joy and relief in that moment. I stepped onto the road and turned to look behind me, but I can't even see the swamp through the trees now. It's almost pitch black there, but luckily there's some moonlight, and the light on the bike also worked. I climb on my bike, pedaling home as quick as I can. About half an hour later, I even had some cell phone reception for a moment, so I can call my mum and tell her what happened. Well, I told her I got lost. I didn't want her to know that I worked myself into a panic and got into a dangerous situation, that I had a horrible feeling I couldn't shake of being followed. By the time I arrived to our own cabin, I'm completely exhausted and overwhelmed by what's just happened. It's honestly almost putting me into a state of shock thinking of it. I have no idea what was out there, following me or watching me. I don't know why there were so many taxidermy animals in there and it was full of moss and mould. I can't believe something was out there stalking me in the darkness for God knows how long. I've never had a feeling like it in my entire time out in the wilderness since, or before then. It still gives me nightmares to this day. I was 12 or so at the time. Some friends of mine are in the Girl Scouts and invite me to join them for a sleepover at this old sanitarium in Maine, just north of San Francisco. At this time, 50 years ago now, the building's not in the best of conditions. There was an old caretaker's cabin and some outbuildings. My friend and I have wandered around and explored for the first day. Saturday? and well, we're not the best behaved little monsters. In spite of the locked door, we crawl through a window into the caretaker's cabin exploring there. My friend went upstairs and I stay in the downstairs part as a sentry. Already nervous, I was even more jumpy when I heard someone coming down the stairs, but it wasn't my friend. There was no one there, at least I can see. Now fast forward to one evening, in an attempt to go to sleep, we're overtaken by giggles. Now one of the counsellors separated us so the others can sleep. I was placed in bed in this little sunroom thing. It was an enclosed room, but with windows on 3 walls. Now the wall I'm facing actually has a set of French doors and a balcony. Now I'm awoken by a strange sound. It's about 3 in the morning, and everyone else is asleep. I then watch a woman in an old-fashioned dress walk past the doors through to the balcony, look at me, then descend the stairs silently. I figure out it's just a counsellor, until I wake up in the morning and realise that there's no stairs. We explored every acre of that place and never found any signs of where she could have went. And none of the counsellors were up at that time either. Now I'm not one to believe in the paranormal, but I had one experience I simply cannot explain in any other way. So my family owns this old cabin out in the wilderness. It's half derelict, and to be honest, I don't even stay in there because I hate the spiders that I know are above me. I instead sleep outside in my tent. And one night, I'm doing exactly that, thinking, wow, I'm glad I'm in here, not in there with all them spiders and the real danger. At that very moment, I can hear a piano in the background. I think my phone's on, so I go and check it, but it's on charge and there's no sound coming from it. I unzip the tent, and I can see a torch and a white piano. I've rubbed my eyes because this makes literally no sense to me, and this is where the sound's coming from. I pull out my binoculars and sure enough, there's a piano with a torch next to it and sound coming from it. Hell nah, I think to myself. I look around for people and see no one. I go inside the tent again, going to get my rifle because I'm very scared now. Just as I come into the tent, the sound stops. I come out of the tent and it's gone. Only the torch remains, so it's been knocked over. My dog is absolutely terrified at this point too, so I know something's up. I grab my stuff near my tent and just get the hell out of there with my dog. I've never been back there since, and I still have no logical explanation for this whatsoever. I really wish I had a reasonable answer, but I have none, and I've never seen anything like it. Me and my dad, and younger brothers and mum were all staying in this lovely cabin out in the forest one winter. It was close to Christmas time, and we love staying out there. We're a wilderness family, and my dad's big on hunting, so this was a great time for us, and I have a lot of my most fond memories here. Now one night we're staying in the cabin, and my mum just can't sleep. My dad says she's just being paranoid and that she could go back to bed, but she refuses to. Just as I wake up, and my brother does to hear this, we hear an extremely high-pitched sound that we've never heard before, and literally, all of the windows simultaneously blow out on the cabin. My mum and dad don't take a second to react, rush us into the car. My dad gets his shotgun and does a quick sweep around. He can't find anything. I never seen him look so scared, and hops back into the car, and we drive out of there. A few years later we get the windows replaced, but we end up selling the place. When I speak to my mum and dad about it to this day, they still get very scared and say they really don't have an answer for what happened. When I was younger, I used to love go exploring the woods and forest with my friend. Now, we used to have to lie about what we were actually doing, because there's no way in hell that any parents in their right minds are going to let their kids do this. But we were lying and did so anyway. Now we set off like normal one day, and it began to rain heavily. I already slipped on a rock and ended up twisting my ankle, so I wanted to go home. However, my friend, James, wanted to stay out later. I was hesitant but said fine because I had nothing better to get on with. So we're going about exploring when we realise how dark it's getting. Not to worry, we have flashlights. We shine our lights around and hit a dark object. We both focus our lights simultaneously and hey, it's a cabin. It's a really old looking one too. We both look at each other and smile, really excited to go and explore in there. My friend James says as a joke, last one to get there is a loser, and jogs off, and what happens no less than 4 seconds later? Twist his ankle like me. He's in some pain, but I literally cannot stop laughing. I still think it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I eventually catch up with him and say we've really got to get heading home now, but not before we explore in here. As we're doing so, I get this horrible feeling like we're being watched. Something just feels off and I don't know what it is. I get worried maybe an animal's in there, so decide to throw a log in. As I do so, I hear an extremely loud thump sound and snap. It scares the life out of me and I actually fall over. I can't believe you're that scared, man, my friend says to me, and I say sharp. I didn't think the floor was that weak. I threw it through the window, but it also props the door open. And as it does so, to my horror, I can see this place has been booby wrapped with a bear trap, and I've just set it off, and some other trap in the background that I can't actually see. And the feeling of being watched? It's getting worse now. We both look at each other terrified, knowing that we can't even run if we want to. We both link arms and kind of support each other's hurt legs, and get out of there as quick as we possibly can. We both swore never to tell our parents what happened, but looking back on it now, it's absolutely horrifying to think that someone booby-trapped a cabin in the middle of the woods, obviously trying to lure people in. And that was almost us. If it wasn't for some stupid injuries, my friend would have sprinted in there and trapped himself, and God knows what would have happened, or it could have been myself.